Hi, I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you're listening to Wild Voice, the podcast where I take this voice of mine and share my wild journey with you. Being widowed at 34 with a 15-month-old, most would see as life ending, and instead, I alchemized it and put life back together. Through my own healing, I realized who I am and what I'm here to do. I'm an intuitive energy healer and spiritual teacher, and sharing how I view the world is how I help you upgrade your life and alchemize your journey into magic. Today's episode is an interview I did with Stephanie Davies. She's a life and success coach, wife, mom of two, and all-around amazing human, showing up front and center for this Earth School we've all signed up for. I've gotten the pleasure to follow her journey through social media and mutual friends, and today was a breath of fresh air to connect for real. She has gone on quite the journey, not only in how she lives her life and shows up for her family, but what she chooses to do with that soul purpose of hers. I love connecting with people on a soul level. That's what life is all about. And our convo today was just that. Our chat ranges from what has gotten her to the outlook she now has on life, financial struggles, emotional healing, the idea of borrowing beliefs, fostering intuition in our kids, and how we like our eggs. Enjoy Steph's outlook on life and some great behind-the-scenes tips that you'll want to integrate into your own life. Like yesterday. Soul fam, enjoy. So you have had such a beautiful journey, and I have gotten to follow along and see how you've just evolved as a human being and a mom and a person and a wife and a friend. And I just want to share that because I think there's so much magic in what you share and how you share it. And it's so raw and real. And even the stuff you go through with your little ones and yourself personally, I just think it makes things so much easier when we're like, oh, that person gets it. Like, yes, they understand how this world works a little differently and they practice that and work on that, but they also are human and they also get those moments.
I feel like that's what people are craving now, though, is like, let me see myself in you. All pretty, like social media is like peaked in, okay, the magazine front.
Yes.
But are we like, how are we the same?
Right. Kind of tell us like your journey or kind of where you feel like sums up how you've gotten to this beautiful awareness and consciousness and mindfulness that you operate from and grow from so that we can know it wasn't always like this, right?
100%. And it's not all magical also now.
Right.
I would say the journey to like deepening my understanding of the world and where I belong in it and my spiritual beliefs and all of that really happened when I became a mother. And, you have these full stop moments in your life where you're like, how have I been living? What do I really want? Are things aligned? So I had my first baby kind of unexpectedly. I was in this big girl job. And that's when things were out of alignment, I started to feel them more on a physical level. Like I cannot be away from my baby was really the first ping and my first exposure to having to take a big leap and surrender and trust and build this faith muscle through taking this big leap and just trusting in myself. So that was a new muscle to work 11 years ago. Okay, is it safe to trust in myself? What does it mean to trust in this bigger picture? Am I being supported by something bigger? And that's really where it started. I would be out on walks with her with no plan because I left my job, but just this, there was enough of a spark inside, enough of the, like there was this small voice saying, there is more, there has to be more. If you feel this pull to not miss these moments with your baby, there has to be a way. But then in my human experience, I'd be out walking. I'm like, how are we ever going to do this? Predators are calling. It was the biggest leap of faith of my life, truly, that kind of catapulted me into this belief that we are being supported by something greater. When we decide to live from a place of truth, for me, that means then we're living in a place of love and acceptance for ourselves, that we bring more love into the world. And I do believe that then that's a cycle that can continue to lead us to the next right path, the next right person, the next right opportunity. So that's really how that started to unfold. I trusted, I would be tested. I would then receive a small yes. I would trust that next right yes that then led to the next one that felt more aligned and found my way into entrepreneurship and feeling like those leaps were paying off. And from there, I feel like it's gone up and down. And, I've yelled at the universe and not understood a lot of the hardship relationships that life has, naturally brought in this human experience over the last decade. So it's, I feel like the universe and I are constantly, we're working on our relationship. But when things are really hard, I do feel like that foundation of trust that there's, something else at play, and
Mhm.
that it has to have meaning, or why are we even
Mhm.
here, even when it's
Right.
hard. So yeah, that's led to, showing up in the social media world, which I'm so grateful brings connections like these, and
Mhm.
and getting to experience other people doing really good work in the world and supporting people's healing and growth. And I'm just crazy about helping people cultivate a vision if they've never really played around with goal setting or having a vision that pulls them, feeling empowered to really define that and get clarity around that. And then making them realize that it's so stupid simple how to make it happen. Like then how
Mhm.
to be like back in the 3D and be like, okay, what's our plan here? How do we get our energy in line, and what are we going to do? And how are we going to measure? So I feel like
Yes.
I've been given, some beautiful strengths that I'm just grateful to get to share with people, in terms of just
Well,
making it like a no-brainer to go for it. Like life is so short.
yes.
We have to go
Yes.
for it.
Exactly. Well, that's so beautifully put, because I think something that you said that sticks out to me and I still feel like I have a hard time with is that trust
Mhm.
piece, right? And it's not so much of trusting, and maybe you'll relate. It's like knowing I know it's going to work out, but trusting the way it's going is
Mhm.
sometimes hard in certain areas of our life. Like I could see, like for me personally, work and vocation and that stuff, that to me, like I get it's going to work out. Like that stuff doesn't, but then there's parts in like relationships or family, anything with my son. I'm like, but is it? But is it? But I'm like, but better. It's going to work out. But then I'm like, but is it? But is it? So it's funny. Do you find that you have areas it's hard to get on board, yet everywhere else we get it? And it's funny that our human self can't be like, just get it across the board. It's going to be fine.
Just apply the same thing. You bring up a beautiful point that I think we forget as humans, that everyone has a thing,
Yeah.
whether it's money, whether it's family, relationships. It's a sacred contract, right? We have
Right.
this lesson that presents itself. Again, another layer of the onion. Again,
Yeah.
more healing. What is
Mhm.
there to learn here? What's really here? And so the people that come to me mostly are in a life transition. There's been a realization that they want to transition out of the corporate world, or begin to invest in themselves in some way that's scary to them. Whether it's making a change with their health, their relationships, there's just this critical moment and they need help with that leap, with that trust, with
Mhm.
the simple plan to put in place. Really, to borrow belief, I feel like is what we do from one another, right? We can see
Mhm.
someone doing it, and we just need to have someone in our corner that hears us, that can hear that we do have fears, or that there is this thing that's holding us back. For me personally, definitely have, that area of my life where there are things that do come easily, or feel more natural, or feel easier to take on, even when they're
Mhm.
challenging. And then there's things where you're like, okay, for me it's my health, and I have to just really stay in a grounded place, and use one of Gabby Bernstein's methods of like choosing again when those thoughts come in. I think that has been so powerful when we release the shame that there's a part of us that
Yeah.
is just tender, and we can go, okay, ooh, there it is, right? Like the awareness is so huge.
Yeah.
Okay, like I'm awake in this way now, and I'm going to choose something different. I'm going to get up and
Yeah.
grab some water. I'm going to move my body. So very similar with clients. Like, how can we break that old pattern, begin to develop some new neural pathways that stretch us just enough that we're at that edge, like they talk about in yoga, but we're not like blasting our nervous systems into hyper dysregulation with,
For sure.
massive change.
Borrowing belief, I've never heard that. That is a beautiful way to describe it, because that is kind of right. We pick up on little things. I can say for sure I've borrowed beliefs of yours, things I've seen. I'm like, oh, what a great reminder. And I think I've even mentioned like, oh, I needed to be reminded of that today. Like, thanks for sharing that. We can take these things from each other and not feel like they have to all be that we can apply them to our own life and still have taken someone else's belief and made it our own and just applied it that way. when you find that people are like going to take that leap and they're going to jump, but they're having that human moment, which we all have. And what do you find is like the most impactful? Is it teaching them about how the world works spiritually and like soul contracts and kind of why we were put here and why the struggle is probably there? Or do you find they need something a little bit more tangible and action oriented for that first big leap into the big change? Or a combo of both, I guess.
It's all about getting them into the feeling of the thing, right? So teaching that the feeling is accessible now, for one. Why do we want this? And then also in NLP, there's a concept of like chunking up. Like, for what purpose do you want this? It could be a very, simple goal, not simple, but, in terms of how complicated things can get. Let's say they want to, learn how to make 5K online from home. And it's like, okay, we can write that down. We can make a plan. But for what purpose do we want this? How can we drop so deeply into this emotional pulse of this goal that then the challenges seem like whatever?
Right.
So if we can think about what that means for breaking a generational cycle in our families and being able to provide for our kids and what that would mean. Like, I'll never forget when I bought an $80 annual pass to the Children's Museum for my daughter. And that was just one of those moments where I felt like I could say yes for her. And then that step just ignited my vision even further. So if we can drop into, for what purpose do we want this? And keep asking that, okay, so that you can feel comfortable paying your bills. But for what purpose? Why do you want that? And then why do you want that? And we end up chunking up so high that it's like for love, for peace. It gets so big that then the opinions of others, or the launch that doesn't work, or the conversation that doesn't go the way we planned, all of those fears just feel so much smaller when they're stacked up against this vision that is bigger than you.
That's amazing. And for those that don't know, what is NLP?
NLP is neuro-linguistic programming. So just interesting ways to use language to connect with people, body language, and just these other tools and skills that help us on a subconscious level to get closer to what it is we want. So very tangible, a science, right? But also like taps into this untouchable field that we're all also operating in. Super interesting stuff.
And the programming just in general, like you brought up generational, beliefs or programming or things. And programming sounds like such a stale word, but it's anything that we've kind of taken on as our own. But we actually, what I find is the most intriguing is a lot of the times we don't even know that it's there until we kind of start to evolve and choose a different path. And then things, the way we used to do things or the way we used to think starts to feel really clumsy. I'm in quicksand. I'm like, okay, well, I'm doing the things, but it's not getting me evolvement or growth or result. And so with programming, would you best describe to somebody how they would even know if they have a limiting belief or an old program or something they've just been raised with? Like, these are things I still, with time, have evolved through and are still figuring out. So how would you tell somebody where to start? Like, how do you even know if you have that?
I would first pay attention to how you speak about yourself, how you identify. If you identify as someone who's not good with money, or I'm just fill in the blank, is a good place to start. Okay, does this belief I have about myself, about who I am, I'm just not good in relationships, serve where I want to go? So is this belief I'm holding, it's kind of like, I call it the Marie Kondo of the brain, cleaning out the closet, like what's in here? If there's only so much capacity if there's only so many beliefs I can hold, let me pull them all out. Do I want to keep this one? Does this still fit? Like you said, sometimes an identity works with us, protects us, serves us, takes us to our next level. And then one day it's like the shirt doesn't fit anymore. Or it's like, you're like,
yes.
Fit? Did this ever fit?
Did I ever like this? I don't get it. When did I like this?
Loved this. Who was that?
Yeah.
So you can think about these automatic choices that we're not really making. As an analogy that kind of helps my clients think about it is when you drive home from work or you drive home from the supermarket and you don't have to think about where you're going. You zone out. You're like, did I even pass that street? So these neural pathways in our brain are like well-beaten paths that are easy for us to take. They're familiar. So that's the part part that people can start to struggle with when they realize that this no longer serves them, but they're like, why do I keep doing this? Which can then just lead to, right, lower life force energy to do anything. Just here I am again in the same pattern. And then on the flip side, when we decide to start to make change, that feels uncomfortable too. And our brains are like, no, 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 like go for
Mhm.
what's comfortable.
Danger, danger.
So I feel like just breathing a collective sigh of relief that it's normal for our brains to say danger, danger when it's something new. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean danger, but it
Yeah.
means, okay, I'm going to choose this path. And
Mhm.
I've shared this analogy in a lot of my programs about imagining that you're going for a hike that you've always like, you know, the route, you know where it ends, you know what the view
Mhm.
looks like. But one day you're on this hike and you hear something off in the distance. You're like, is that a waterfall? And you decide to explore off the path and you're crunching on leaves and twigs and the sound is getting louder and you're getting closer and you pop out and you're like, holy crap, there's this waterfall. Or imagine what would just totally psych you out on this
Yeah.
experience. So then you go back the next day. Again, you choose this path and all of a sudden, one day you don't even realize it's happened. That becomes the path that's easier to find. The other one now has overgrowth because you're not taking it anymore. So same thing with these neural pathways. It's hard at the beginning to make these changes. It feels very like a very conscious choice. Then over time, we're like, look at me. I reframe so easily. Or like that thing that normally totally activates me. I noticed it, used a tool, and move forward, you know? So I feel like when we start to be able to see these things as more changeable, then that kind of unlocks unlimited potential for us, right?
Oh,
It's like, oh.
yes. Yes. Like, oh my, I think if anyone has experienced that, I think we've experienced, I think anyone on this planet has had something they can relate to that feeling and be like, okay, so it's there. And I find that that's so helpful if we can look back and just sift through and think about like, was there a time that you felt that way? Was there a time that you noticed this? Like when a lot of people will say like with intuition,
Mhm.
I don't have it. Why would I have made all these other choices in my life if I had intuition? Or why would I have not noticed this was happening if I had intuition? And I had to learn this way back in the day. And then I get the opportunity to share with people. I'm like, you have intuition. Like it's always there. It's that gut feeling, right? Just because it doesn't play out the way we think it should doesn't mean we didn't use it. Because sometimes using that intuition to take us down a path we think is not right actually gets us to where we're meant to go much quicker. But it's that uncomfortable feeling again, right? It's understanding things are going to be uncomfortable. Life doesn't have to be hard all the time, but it is meant to be pushing and pulling. And then we get moments of relief. Have you felt that way? I feel like I definitely have moments where I'm like, oh, I'm in one of those growth spurts. And then I'll get like, some release from that. And then to kind of go back and be like, okay, I'm not, the universe and I can take a break from each other for a minute and talking every day. I know there's been so many times I've cursed the universe. Okay, I don't want to be so aware. I don't want to know so much. I don't want to know that I should be doing this or that, and using should lightly, but just knowing better into
Yeah.
myself. Come on, can I just be super unaware and just like
Just for
not
a
even
day.
know? Yeah, just for a day. Could I just not give a shit about anything? I have had to move myself out of that space of growth mindset. You see what it does. And so you see the beauty in it. And then you unknowingly chase it, always looking, okay, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? And sometimes more recently, I've had to be like, okay, it could just be a weird day. I don't have to take 50 things from it that I can learn from to make sure it doesn't happen again. Maybe the lesson is just knowing, like, hey, acknowledge that you just feel crappy today, or you don't feel super conscious today, or whatever that is, and just sit with that. And that could be the lesson. That's what I've found more recently.
100%. I just told my best friend the other day, like, I'm done with the layers of the onion right now. I'm ready for a winning season. I feel like
Yes.
because it's a blessing and a curse when you're highly sensitive and
Mhm.
highly aware and
Mhm.
hungry for growth. Sometimes we can get stuck in the healing and in the
Yes.
exploration and forget to also include some sort of action,
Mhm.
right? That then actually trains our subconscious mind to expect ourselves to deliver. Like it helps us collect evidence that we still can do
Mhm.
even when it's hard. And that's really been the season that I've been in. Like, okay, things can be hard, but it's harder when I just stay in it, and actually feels better when I decide to take some sort of action. Maybe it's not the biggest action. Maybe it's
Mhm.
not a huge needle mover, but it's some sort of action, moving my body, working on something creatively. And then to your point of wanting to disconnect, to feel that same sentiment, I feel like whether it's some childhood reparenting or just coming into the world, kind of living in this upper space of my head,
Yes.
allowing room for play and being
Yeah.
silly and throwing on some music and doing the things, the rituals that help you drop into a more playful state. For me,
Mhm.
it's been investing heavily in friendships and healing my friendship wound and just allowing myself to feel like it's okay to just be. I
Mhm.
can still be doing the work, but maybe we can channel a little more energy into fun and
Gosh.
light so that then more can come through. That's when we're of
Yes.
service. Like it's of high service for us to heal 100%.
Mhm.
Look at the world. If we
Right.
all could just do
Oh my
a
gosh.
little bit of it, would change everything. So maybe we just feel that we have to do it all for
Yeah.
everyone.
Yes. Maybe that's what we're picking up on because it seems like such a concept that we all could get behind, right? To be like, hey, we want to better the world. All these other things we're doing externally is a beautiful gesture and is needed and is supportive to this world we're creating and evolving in. Also, the start to that, like we say with everything, is within. If we could just internally turn in on something that you're not liking that you're seeing outwardly, even if it's real extended, like in the world, how it operates, and figure out, okay, what is something I can do for myself today to evolve, to heal? It could be super small, like the littlest things make the biggest improvements, and start there. I think we'd be so surprised if everyone was told, tackle one little thing on your mind that's a chip on your shoulder that bugs you, that pulls you into trigger moments, and just mess with that instead of looking outward. And if people were told like that actually will help the world as a collective, would we all do it? I mean, tell me your thoughts.
Yeah, there's so much here. It reminds me of, I was teaching this concept in a very simple manner to one of my daughters the other day. So to go back to what you said about intuition, like
Mhm.
here's how I love, like my brain simplifies things so much.
Mhm.
I feel like what's going on, the things that constantly are going on in the world, if we feel that sense of empowerment to fill our tanks, to know ourselves, could that happening at a foundational level then ripple out and, like you said, not like create more closeness versus separation? So here's an example. The other morning I was asking my daughter how she wanted her eggs, and this is a beautiful moment where we forget that they're watching us and they're listening, and they're
Oh, for
catching
sure.
what we're putting out, right? And I was like, do you want them scrambled? Or she's liking over medium eggs lately, and she's like
Mhm.
laying in bed, and really I'm trying to distract her from the fact that she's mad she has to get out of
Yeah.
bed. We like your eggs. I'm good at this.
Yes.
And so she's like, I don't know. And so there's a coin flip method that Gabby Bernstein teaches. But I told her, I was like, pick one of my hands. One is going to be scrambled, one's going to be over medium. She picks the hand, it's over medium. And I'm like, how do you feel about that? She's like, I don't know. I said, do you feel yay or do you feel eh? She was like, I feel eh. And I'm like, that's your intuition. Like the intuition knows
Mhm.
that, then there's your answer.
Mhm.
She's like, oh, I really did want scrambled eggs this whole time. So, how does that translate to then present day? 37-year-old. I want to go to yoga, but there's so much else that I could be doing for my family or this.
Mhm.
Gosh, I really want to go. So, when I choose to not go and put others above myself in this moment, resentment starts to build, energy starts to decrease. Our tank decreases. But what if we decided that what was of the highest good for us had to be of the highest good for others?
Mhm.
Right. So me going to yoga, feeling a little guilty about leaving my kids, but it's what my tummy's telling me that feels like a yay to me.
Mhm.
And then when we take that out into the world and chunk it up bit greater and greater, we're like, okay, well then I don't have to defend myself in these heated conversations. I can trust in myself. So it's so neat to really simplify a big concept like intuition to these small moments that really just create an internal environment that's able to be in spaces with people that disagree, that's able to just be good with us,
Mhm.
right? And
Mhm.
so there's a snapshot into my brain of asking my kid how they
I
want
love
their eggs, and I'm
I
like,
love it.
this is just like, somebody give me a microphone, this is the moment. but it but it is. I don't think that
Yeah.
generations past, even our generation, was still
No.
kind of on the heels of be seen and not heard. And so we're
Yeah.
having to learn how to just safely trust in what we want and who we are and what we want to say. And so, yes, I think the world peace comes from learning
Yeah.
how you want your eggs and
Yeah.
asking.
Trust your gut and have scrambled eggs.
Trust your gut. Take that moment to pause and
Yeah.
notice then when there's resistance to wanting what we want.
Mhm.
Take a look at that. There's your work,
Mhm.
right? Like there's the
Mhm.
work to do to get through to living most often in a place of alignment,
Mhm.
and see how that impacts just your experience and the people around you. It's pretty crazy.
It is. And I'm so glad you touched on this because I think intuition is such a big thing. And a lot of people see it have different ways of how they see it. And how you just explained it is a perfect example of how we can use it and how it can be applied to anybody. And it has nothing to do if you have like spiritual gifts or psychic abilities. It has to do with becoming more centered in yourself and being able to listen and feel and hear and getting clear on what's your signal. Is it a feeling in your gut? Is it something in your brain? Do you see like a visual? Do you see a color? Like there's so many different ways we get, and you do not have to have some psychic ability to know or to be getting those. We're all born with intuition, with this knowing, with this center and this grounding. And it's just learning, which a lot of us don't get taught. I know myself personally, like you brought up, how we're raised. Most of us, our generation was, you do it because I said so. I'm going to choose because I'm busy. This is survival, right? It was operating. We get how that goes. And I need you to eat your eggs this way because I already made them because we're rushing out the door. I need to get ready for work. And this is how we're going to do it. You need to be fed and out the door. That's my job as your parent. And I think a lot of us are realizing and learning from that and seeing how can we upgrade that? How can we evolve this and teach this next generation and even adults, right? The way we operate and trust our intuition, people will see that and borrow that belief and see that and how that works. And so I just love that you brought that up because it's funny. Last night with Nash, I did the same thing. We got a bunch of these books because we just did an overhaul. We were sitting on the floor and he had all of these books that we had ordered through school and he didn't know which one to choose. And I said, you can choose two. And so he was like, I don't know. I don't know. He's like, well, put them behind your back. And I was like, okay, because I do this a lot, like how you do with your girls. I want to give him choices because at times when there's not a big fall point, I want him to practice choosing things and then trusting his gut and not second guessing himself. And also knowing the difference between I'm uncomfortable, this is new, and I'm uncomfortable because this isn't for me. Like this is not the path for me. And so we practice a lot with that. And I did the kind of similar thing. I had him behind my back and he chose one, and one was Ninja Turtles and one was about the earth or something. And when I showed him, well, it wasn't the Ninja Turtle one. And that's the one I thought he wanted. And I'm like, so what do you think about this? And he's like, kind of looked for a minute and he's like, okay. And I was like, were you wanting this one? And it was the Ninja Turtle one I was pointing at. And he was like, no, he's like, and I chose that one. So I'm going to trust my intuition and I'm just going to go with it. And I was like, okay. And so we sat and read it and he was super stoked about it. But there have been times where he's chosen one. I'm like, did you really want this one? And he was like, yeah. I'm like, well, you got to make your choice and you stick with it. So which one feels right? It's a muscle that we have to work like anything else, like physical therapy. But I feel like it's something that very easily can be disregarded. And I feel like it's such a gift and it's so beautiful if we can continue to nurture that, even as adults, but with children and kids. And I just think it's a perfect segue into parenting because parenting, I'm just going to give it a deep sigh.
Can we give two? Because
Yes.
I have a middle schooler now. So like,
Oh my gosh. We're going to give another one. And you have girls. Girls and boys are so magical in their own right. They're so very different. And being a girl myself, right? I can relate to those moments. And now raising a boy, I'm like, oh my gosh, I didn't even know your brain worked like this.
they are our greatest teachers for sure.
Oh, 100%. But they are so, like how you said, your life changed when your first daughter was born. And that was the same thing with me. It was like the second Nash was born, something changed. And I just have like no words for it. It's crazy making and beautiful and lovely and scary and hard. And with parenting, it feels to me tougher to parent in a more high conscious, aware way to enforce intuition, nurture intuition. I'd rather have him fall, when he's 8 than when he's 80. So I've fallen big time at 34 years old, and it's a much harder fall than when we're younger, and we can learn the same lessons as little individuals. So how has that journey been for you?
I feel like it comes back to the work that we do on ourselves so that we have a greater capacity to hold space for them. And I've entered this stage of parenting. So, for a tiny backstory, in 2021, our oldest daughter started having grand mal seizures, and it kind of thrusted us into, I don't know if I mentioned it before we started recording or when we were recording, but me being pretty mad at the universe. And that kind of unlocked a new level of my own spiritual journey because I had to find meaning in it. And I had to confront a lot of beliefs I had in terms of everything happens for a reason or any other little
100%.
cliche things that we throw out.
Mm-hmm.
And so the pendulum sort of swung to hypervigilance. And I feel like a lot of us who are healing and highly sensitive empaths, we can lean a little helicoptery with these kids. Like, let me undo every pattern that's ever been passed down.
For sure. That's me, 100%.
And be really hard on ourselves when there's some beauty to it, right? We want to give them things that we didn't have. And also, we might find, I know I've found personally, these different ages bring up new levels of healing for myself. Wait, that was happening when I was 5. What was everyone thinking? What were the adults doing in my life then? Or, oh, I must have been sad then. Or, just like working through that on my own level, and then learning, like you were saying, to be present and be sturdy for them and offer them guidance. But also there was a moment where I had to say, this is her journey. And I can't intercept every hardship, and I can't control every outcome. I can see my own wounding. For me, a lot of it was around friendships because I moved a lot as a kid. And so I could find myself wanting to control these outcomes for her. And I was like, man, I have to let go of this because now I had to tell my kids, like, imagine mom is a jug of milk. And each time something happens, you pour a little out. Like, it's mostly at the end of the day when I'm totally empty and fried. If we haven't done a good job of checking in with each other, I'm like, now I'm an empty jug. And you're asking for more, but there's nothing left, and they're looking at me like, oh shit.
Okay. Here she goes.
But they're like kind of understanding. So now there's moments when it'll be midday and something, we'll be asking for the same thing for the 10th time or doing whatever. Sure. And I'll just mention to them, I'm like, this is one of those moments where if you end up wanting something from me later, I might not have it to give. So how can we come to a solution now? And so they're like, okay, mom's jug is still half full. Like, let's keep it there. So, I mean, it is a work in progress, but I feel like when we think about what was most impactful for us as children, and then we can translate that into our presence for our children. I have to remind myself that making pancakes in the morning when it's a Tuesday is something that they might remember just mom taking the time more than some big drawn out conversation that we had about that mistake we made. It's really in the daily intentions. And I have this practice that I do most days where I just sit and I think about each of my children. I think about my partner and I think about my work, and I just identify a word, maybe 3 words, like how would I want to be described in that area of my life for that middle schooler today? She likes me silly. My younger one likes me adventurous and slow. And so I just try to have these anchors that I come back to when I'm getting frustrated about homework. I'm like, remember, she needs you silly and playful. So how can we bring a little bit of that for her? So that has been maybe one of the most impactful things, like when the mornings are in a rush and you're just like, okay, hold on. Like, this is the moment. Like, this is the legacy. This is it. The journey is it. It's not at graduation that we're like, we did a great job with that kid and now they're off,
Right.
And it's that way for like that to me goes into every area of life too. Like if we can just tap into like, okay, who knows what tomorrow or this afternoon is going to bring. So like, how did we do breakfast? It doesn't have to be freaking pancakes or whatever. It can literally just be like a 10-second hug. Maybe hugs make you uncomfortable because you weren't hugged as a kid, and like that is repairing that line for your child. So it can be so simple. But those in setting those intentions with my kids is also just kind of blown my mind, made me feel more proud and like,
Yeah.
I did something today.
I did something right. Well, I'm going to totally take that. And I'm going to borrow that belief and I'm going to use that because that is such an amazing tool to have because I think it's so many times we try and show up. I can speak for myself. I try and show up as all the things because I am. I feel like I'm trying to do the least amount of damage and the most amount of love and support. And sometimes I am like, you just feel like you're putting out fires and you
Yeah.
feel like it's exhausting. And there have been times where I've just been like, I'm so tired. I'm so exhausted from what I'm doing to myself,
Yeah.
what I'm putting the expectations and a healer I've worked with before, she had said something and she said, when you are expecting something out of a situation. So whether that's the ideal family or the ideal job or ideal financial income, whatever it might be, she said, sit back and realize that when we have those expectations, it's really a high expectation for ourselves. So we're projecting that out. And really that expectation in our eyes of what that looks like actually isn't what our soul wants. It's just that reverse. It's what's going on internally coming out on the outside. And then we exhaust ourselves because we're spinning our wheels because it's really not where we're supposed to be. It's again that energy, that alignment. We're not really aligned with that ideal expectation of that one thing. It's really understand like, oh, I do. I have really high expectations of myself. And it doesn't mean we shouldn't. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have these ideals and things we want to achieve, but there's a very big difference between expecting something from ourselves in such an extreme way and how that is exhausting us. I've also been told exhaustion and gray hairs means we need to have more fun. So that's also
I did get a lot of gray hairs in 2021.
and this last year, my gray hairs like started like really coming up out of nowhere. And I'm like, okay, I gotta have more fun. I gotta play. And you mentioned being silly and I think kids are such a beautiful reminder of that. Even if we're just observing them, whether we're in charge of them, taking care of them, or responsible for them. Like Nash is such a great reminder to me sometimes when he says things and I'm like, you're right. Like kids speak the most beautiful truths because they really don't know to care yet. Like, just tell me, what should I wear today? I have done that. That sometimes doesn't work out so well, but
I feel like that needs to be an Instagram series for us to watch. Please let us maybe on Mondays or something. Give us
yeah,
something to look forward to.
that's a good one. Nash is going to pick out my plan for the day and let's see how it goes.
Can you imagine how great it would be though? They're like,
Oh,
we're gonna, have ice
yeah,
for breakfast and
for
then
sure. And those are things that it's funny with parenting. I've had people, I know there was a phase because Nash and I, as we've evolved, and I know you've had these moments if you've dealt with health, scares and things that have gone on, you really start to look at life very differently. And it's a gift and it seems very silly, but it really is because you see the world through a lens that you really don't get an opportunity to see it through unless you've really dealt with something and seen how short life can be. And a lot of us have had that experience. And I've seen it. I'm like, thank goodness, because I can very easily check myself. Doesn't mean I don't still operate in ways and be like, okay, remember, life is short, but you can check yourself much easier because you're like, can take yourself back. Remember when times were really hard and all you cared about was waking up the next morning? Like all you cared about was that everyone was healthy. All this other shit that you're thinking about doesn't even matter. And you were the happiest with the least amount of things. It was just the core things, right? So it doesn't mean that we can't, because then I get stuck in that limbo of life is short. And then I'm like, okay, well, there is like this middle ground of life is very short, operate from this way. And there's a future you'd like to see and things you'd like to create and things you'd like to put out there. But I've always felt it served me much, much better if I had to choose a way of just life is short. It's operate from that understanding because it is, right? You never regret playing with your kid for an hour longer. So it's a balance.
Well, and therein lies the question, how do we keep that perspective if we've
Mhm,
had some of those challenges?
mhm.
Or this is what I've been asking myself, because if you asked me 5 years ago, I had a lot of guilt about my success. I did feel like I hadn't really been through enough to have earned it.
Ah,
And then the universe gave me some really big things. Obviously, I didn't ask for what happened.
right.
to our family, but there was a crack, right?
Mhm.
In my own internal sense of worth and belief. And so for me now, the question is, how do we help people cultivate that perspective without having to feel like we have to manifest or create some sort of chaos in our lives?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I find for me, in some like really sick and morbid way, sometimes I have to, same thing with the intentions that I set with the words with the kids. I
Mhm.
have to take myself to this energy of at the end of my life, what's important. If I'm feeling disconnected and a little too in
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
minutia of like organizing my closet or whatever needs to get done, right?
Sure.
Like, what is really going to matter?
Mhm.
That's what's helping me overcome the health anxiety I shared that I have. Like, okay, that can exist. And if something is ever going to be really wrong with me, what do I want to leave for my children in terms of the work that I do
Mhm.
or how I showed up for them and volunteering at their school or whatever it is I'm doing? Like, learning to hold these two things and ask those hard questions. There's a
Mhm.
really beautiful set of research that was done on the top regrets of the dying.
Mhm.
I find myself Googling it maybe once or twice a year just to remember, like, what are these regrets, right?
Yeah.
It's hearing what people think. It's not having enough fun. It's working too hard,
Yeah.
right? So
Mhm.
keeping those things in mind as just ways to check ourselves. Like,
Mhm.
what is truly important? And we can hustle our faces off and then like shut it all down and let the kids bake something and make a disaster of the kitchen.
Mm.
That's the balance I'm finding in my life right now is maybe I'm getting up an hour early to get my workout and visualization and rituals in so that I can jump right into work when the kids go to school, but then I'm going to sneak away for noon yoga. Like finding
Mhm.
that balance of
Mhm.
pleasure and experiencing life. And then like you said, still having this thing that I have a vision for creating and allowing that to happen just with a little less force and a little more inspiration and real life living.
Yeah. Right. And that's so beautifully said because that soul alignment, if you're meant to, if it feels right to go to yoga at noon, and some people be like, oh, I have to get work done, financially, yoga doesn't make me money. But I think if we could push that perspective out a little bit and be like, actually, does taking care of yourself so that you're more aware, you're more present. So when you do go to work, you actually have ideas that you maybe wouldn't have come up with because you didn't give yourself that break, that mind reset, that maybe that hour of work that you do is actually just even more impactful than the 6 hours you would have sat down and grinded out, you know?
100%. Like
And
sometimes it's the space that
mhm,
creates like major
mhm,
productivity.
mhm,
I love the analogy of like the arrow pulling back.
mhm,
Sometimes we can feel like, therapy or whatever healing modality we're doing, like, but I really should be building the website. But if you
mhm,
have this vision of, okay, the arrow is pulling back, I'm still doing some of those things, honoring that idea, but then boom, like once that arrow shoots forward, it's like you skip other steps that had you just
sure.
felt like you needed to follow someone else's formula, you
Ah,
would have taken.
that's a great analogy. And it goes back again to touching on intuition, right? Check in with yourself, align with what feels right. And that's with the smallest little mundane tasks to the biggest things.
Mhm.
And you'll be supported. I have found the times that I've let go and I've aligned with myself and intuitively made choices that maybe didn't make sense, but they just felt right and I jumped. I have been so much more rewarded and in a more streamlined, impactful way and gotten to where I want to go or what feels right or what feels fulfilling in a much more effortless way than kind of going at it this human way that we're taught, right? You wake up, you do this, you work hard. If you care about your kids, you pack their lunch perfectly, you do that, you learn all these things. And it's nice to be like, actually, who told me that? Who decided that? And yeah, you might think of a person and be like, well, this person, my mom, my dad, an aunt and uncle. And you're like, okay, but who decided that for them? Like who told them that? And sometimes I get myself a little too abstract and I'm like, whoa, where am I? Am I on planet Earth anymore? I don't know. But it's something I try and remind Nash of too, that I always tell him, like, especially sending him to school, they're not with us, right? We're not supposed to be with them 24/7 when they have these opportunities. I'm like, okay, this is you. You got to trust your gut. If someone tells you this, you're respectful. You also need to listen to yourself. And I think it's this delicate dance of you want to raise kind, supportive, amazing humans, right? Whatever that looks like. And a lot of the times that looks like being kind and listening well, or being respectful and using words in the right way or in the most non-harming way. And then I'm like, okay, just because an adult tells you to do something, it's like been this delicate dance of no matter who it is, you need to check in with you. In this day and age, to be honest, I can't say that every adult who tells him what to do, even at school, is the right thing to do.
Totally. And even if all they're taking away from that is it's okay to question things, it's
Yeah.
okay to use your voice in the
Mhm.
presence of an adult. It's
Mhm.
okay. You're right. Like
Right.
there's so many things.
Oh my gosh, is that my thing? I think you just touched on my thing. It's using my voice in the presence of adults. Now I'm an adult, but as a kid. So
Totally.
continue. But that was like,
100%. Like, so even it seems like one simple thing when a
mhm,
teacher, one of my kids had this happen a couple years ago, like, no, you have to let whoever wants to play with you. And she came home really upset. And I was like, well, I get what your teacher is trying to say here.
mhm, mhm.
But if there's something that's off and you don't feel comfortable, you don't have to
Right,
do what an adult says
right,
because they say. So
right.
would you like me to read, can we collaborate on
Yeah.
really the outcome that we're looking for here? And so I think it just empowers them. I think the pendulum is swinging a little bit in society, and kids need still a sturdy presence in their life that
For
says, like,
sure.
you're good, I got you.
Mhm,
Ultimately, like,
mhm.
you don't need to be making a gazillion big decisions because you're just a kid. But man, like, imagine who we'd be today if
Oh
we had
my
been told,
gosh.
like,
I
good
know.
idea, tell me more.
I know.
Yeah, you have
I know.
agency. You're
Exactly.
the things you say have worth.
Yes. Yes, I know. And I was watching this movie. I think it was on Netflix, and I think it's called Old Dads. It was an interesting movie, but I watched it because I saw a bunch of people talking about it on Instagram, and it was about this gentle parenting. What I consider, how I view it, is like this high conscious parenting. It doesn't mean it's everything that's happening out there. And it was such the extreme of kind of like a kid was throwing something and hitting this other kid with a stick. And the mom came over and was like, your feelings are your feelings. And she's like, someone go get him his stick. Like the dad, like very like nervously, like just do whatever she says, grabs the stick and gives it back to the kid. And she's like, now you enjoy your day. And she's like, your emotions are valid. And then the kid, she turns her back and the kid launches the stick again and it hits somebody else. And then they're all people, other parents who might be on the extreme of that other extreme are like shaking their heads, like there's no one parenting this kid. So it was interesting to see because I can see the different dynamics and I can see both sides.
Yeah.
And I can see that there's this beautiful opportunity, but live in the balance of the two, allowing them to have structure and feel safe and know certain things. Because in the world, they need to know,
Yeah.
right, to go to a job and do, like, you can't be screaming and running around even if you're emotional. Your emotions are valid, they are yours. Let's tackle those. Let's see why you feel that way. That's so important, to acknowledge your feelings and not push them down and ignore them. Also, there are ways we have to learn how to master them and how to use them, and we can't be throwing things at people and screaming at people. It's not going to get us what we want. So let's learn how we do the delicate dance of both.
Well, and I try to tell my daughters too, these things that you would like are all great. Now let's add in this layer of being in a relationship with other people. And then
Mhm.
that's where we have to learn about what to compromise and what we're not willing to compromise, and
Mhm.
what parts of us we can bring here and there. And I'm proud of us,
Yes, I'm proud of us too. This is a wild ride that we're on as parents, and just navigating ourselves too, right? It just coincides. We're growing, we're learning things, then we're able to bring it to the table and share it with other people in our life, and just keep doing the damn thing each day and showing up and go from there.
I feel like that's really what makes the difference when we're
Yeah.
feeling disempowered with so many things that need fixing in the world. If we can do right in our homes,
Mhm.
it will just change everything, is my belief. If we can be sturdy and believe in who we are and trust in who we are and what we
Mhm.
desire, then we can also hold space for other people's beliefs and desires, even when they don't align with ours, right? Because we're
That's
good.
amazing.
Like,
Yes.
we're good at home with us.
And that's a
So
good reminder when it feels like there's so much and we don't know where to point the arrow and like where to start. That's
Mhm.
a beautiful thing. Just inward, your own home, your own relationships, like even tackling something in your own relationship, kind of focusing on that work together. So
Mhm.
everyone just do the
Just
little things.
just take your full milk jug
Yeah.
out into the world and just pour little bits on people.
Make scrambled eggs, and then we tackle a handful of other things.
The name of this episode.
Right. That's what's good. I'm probably gonna call it scrambled eggs. Just make scrambled eggs.
So why are scrambled eggs spiritual? And
I also want to know, how do you make your scrambled eggs? Because I saw this thing on Instagram and I've been doing it this way. And I'm curious how you make them. And Nash went from not liking eggs. And then now we're like all obsessed with this way of making eggs. So I would like to know, how do you make your scrambled eggs?
you mean if I'm lazy, I crack them in the pan so they get kind
Okay.
of weird and white and yellow in different spots. I don't mix them up.
Perfect.
If I'm really a well-rested mom,
Yeah.
then I'm whipping them up with a little bit of salt, maybe some almond milk, getting a little fluffy. But
Uh-huh.
I'm more concerned about what the solution that you have for us.
Okay. Then because I was wondering, I'm like, has she seen this? So what you do is you take a couple eggs, you beat them in like a bowl. You take like a strainer, but like it's a mesh strainer, and you'll put it over another bowl and you'll pour the beaten eggs into the mesh strainer and allow them to just like sift through that. And you can sit for a little bit depending on how many eggs you have. And you also could take a fork and kind of push them a little bit through. What you'll find is what I learned from this video is it separates the protein in the eggs. And what it does is it cooks more evenly. It also takes the slimy stuff and won't go through the mesh strainer. So that stays in the mesh strainer, doesn't go into the eggs. So you dump the mesh strainer in the little goopy stuff. Then you turn on your pan, you put the eggs in, cook them how you normally would. And then at the end, even if you're dairy free, you can come up with different options. Someone use like creme fraiche or right before they're done, or cream cheese, or you can use like a dairy free alternative. There's so many great things out there. I've also used oat milk butter as kind of in place of this. And it's just like a small amount. It's like the Mykonos oat milk butter is amazing. So they make the most delicious, like fluffiest eggs, and they're cooked so evenly. And we're all obsessed with them. And Nash hated
Okay.
eggs. So, anyways, I can't take it as my own recipe, but I did find it on Instagram and I've used it multiple times, and it's like a game changer. Maybe try it next time.
Yeah, trying it tomorrow.
Yeah. So now I think we've tackled everything from, self-awareness, parenting, eggs, intuition, all the fun things. The last little thing, question I have before we end our beautiful time together, anything that comes to mind that you're like, oh, I'm in the season of this.
Yes. I would say it's been a lifelong, not even lifelong, over the last decade I've been aware of it, but even more so in the last 3 to 6 months is really just letting it be enough. Letting the healing be enough, letting the words that I have to say be enough, letting the exact season that I'm in my life be enough to still serve people. I feel like when we're in pursuit, like there's always more to learn and more to heal. And I love that. And I feel so alive when I'm in that.
Mhm.
But it's a huge drain on my purpose and my confidence if I'm not also taking that out into the world. So I'm stepping into a season of allowing myself to hold two things, whether that's working through, challenges with my mental health, and then also allowing myself to be in my power and serve. So,
Mhm.
not having to have it all fixed or all right before doing the thing that we're
Mhm.
called to do. Ooh, that for me is
Yes.
like my stomach is in butterflies. I can feel
Mhm.
the tears behind my eyes, but that's just the truth of it is like I'm
Mhm.
done
Mhm.
not letting it be enough. I'm
Mhm.
so tired of it. It's too much to carry and I'm just over it.
Oh my gosh, I'm over it too for you. And I feel like that's one of mine too. I'm going to guess is a lot of other people's too, is if we all
And
could just be enough.
And that is the thing. If it's in a boardroom, if it's on social media, if we really just allowed ourselves to say, like, I accept all
Mhm.
parts, I
Mhm.
accept the mess, I accept these weaknesses, I have these strengths, and I'm going to
Mhm.
own that. It impacts everyone that we touch because
Mhm.
they feel our belief or our acceptance and it rubs off on them. That's the borrowing of the belief. When you walk into a room and you're whole, even with all the bits, like it impacts people. And it's just like a law of the universe, right? So
Yes.
if we have a hard time, or if listeners, or us individually have a hard time with accepting that on a personal level, I feel like that's that one level of zoom out. Like, but when I do accept that about myself, my kids can accept those pieces of themselves, and my neighbors and my
Yes.
friends and the people that I impact then have permission as well to do the thing, and not wait until whatever
Right.
goalpost we've set that just continues to move, by the way.
Yeah. It keeps going. I don't know where it's going.
It's always just like, it's like it's hanging from my head, just right.
Yeah.
And so I'm so tired of that. I'm so
Yeah.
tired of that for
Oh my
all of us.
gosh.
Like, it's just like, can we just set it down? Can we create the thing, say the thing, do the thing, and just like let it
Yeah.
out, you know?
Amen. Giving permission and just being. I think that's amazing. Beautifully said. And I appreciate so much our time together.
Oh my gosh, such a pleasure. And I'm so grateful too. Anytime to like get in the vortex of just
Oh my
inspiration.
gosh.
Let's do
I
it.
just love it. Steph, well, thank you so much. And I can't wait until we chat again.
Yeah, awesome.
Okay, just because this episode's over, it doesn't mean our time together has to be. Check the show notes on ways for us to stay connected. And one more thing, if you found this episode helpful, I would be so excited if you chose to rate it, review it, like it, share it, or shout it from the rooftops to those you think might align with it. The more soul-aligned we are, the more beautiful, harmonious, and fulfilling this world becomes. We're in this wild ride of life together. Okay, that's all. I'm your host, Marlo Lemon, and you've been listening to Wild Voice.